You are listening to the Mindset School Podcast, episode 28. Jodi Reed is an inspiring woman. She's used her past difficulties to create a bright future for herself and her children. Listen in as Jodi shares with us her journey, finally accept the grace and love of Christ for herself and surrender to all that He has for her in her life. And it's amazing. Do not miss the amazing things that she does now. Hey friends, welcome to the Mindset School Podcast with Peggy Easterling, where we learn to smile authentically from the inside out. Hello, Jodi. How are you today?
I am great. How are you?
I am so good. I'm so glad to get to have a conversation with you and just be ourselves. And I'm so excited to share with the world your amazing story because I know it's going to help people as we share it today. Can you just tell them briefly a little bit about you?
Yes. So I'm Jodi. I am a mom of 3. I've been a single mom for most of my motherhood. So my kids are now 19, 16, and 8, so kind of all over the place. My 19-year-old just let me know yesterday morning that she is going to be moving out this coming month. And so I'm about to be in a new phase where I'll have just 2 kids at home. I've been cleaning vacation rentals for a living for the most of 2 decades. And I am currently working on building an empire, an online business where I teach other people how to do green cleaning and how to clean without harming their bodies with chemicals or with repetitive stress injury type issues.
That's such an amazing mission to reduce stress in people's body by reducing the environmental stresses that they have. And I kind of do the opposite. I work on people's mindset to reduce the internal pressure of their stresses. And I know in your life and your experience in life, you've gone through some of those internal pressures where sometimes life felt heavy. Can you start at the beginning and share with the world? Because I know they're going to learn so much by listening to your story today.
So I was raised in church, but I was raised in multiple churches. And because my parents were never satisfied and didn't think that any church was good enough for a while there, and it just seemed like we were the church hopping family. A lot of abuse happened at home whenever we were young. I have 4 brothers, and so my brothers and I went through a lot of traumatic events, including a divorce that happened whenever I was 14. My parents finally separated after many years of fighting, pretty much. And it was an ugly, traumatic kind of divorce. And so moving on from that, my brothers went into drugs and alcohol at an early age, and I took a different path where I just tried to submerge myself in God and become part of every youth group that was possible in my town. And so I was involved in 5 different churches probably as a teenager. And I really thought that I was going to be good enough and pray all the rest of the family out of what they were going through, the things that were happening to them. And I have learned that that's not how God works. We don't work our way into salvation, and we can't work our way into the salvation of our whole entire family. But as a teenager, that was my existence, was just church, 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 youth group, youth group, youth group. But I ended up, because of being hurt by family and church family that had preached one thing and lived a different thing. At the age of 19, I fell off the deep end and really started partying some with kids I had met. And honestly, I had this feeling, this type of understanding of God, that if you were in sin, that it didn't matter what kind of sin it was, that you were already a sinner. That if you walked away from God and did one thing wrong, you might as well do all the things wrong, because sin is sin. And I really had like a twisted and warped idea of godliness and how God sees us. And so once I did one or two things bad, I felt like, what's the point in trying to do right now? And I really went all out. And so at the age of 20, I met a guy who would later become my husband very shortly after that, actually. And he introduced me to drugs.
Mm.
He was a drug dealer. He was adorable, I thought at the time that he was the cutest guy around. And I became involved with him immediately after meeting him and moved in with him within a week's time of meeting him. And he had introduced me to meth, which is a really hardcore drug that changed my life in that moment. I thought that I had found the thing that was going to make me be able to be me. I don't know, I can't explain it without you having been on drugs before, I guess. I don't really know how else to explain, but I really thought that my mind was opened and suddenly I was confident and I could do anything I wanted to in life. And really what I was a drug addict, and for the next few years he and I were just a mess.
Yeah. So I want to go back. Like, I don't want to take away from your story, but I don't want to miss a piece. You were talking about that early on. You were talking about how you were just striving. You knew salvation, but you were thinking that you had to strive and be perfect and
Right.
measure up. And then when you didn't measure up because you messed up, you thought you had to go all the way in the opposite direction to find what it was that you needed in life to fill that God-sized hole. And
I,
in doing that, there's a process. We have salvation available to us, but there's a process that I'm learning more and more about, and it's called sanctification.
yeah.
And really, sanctification is taking off that striving and putting on God on a daily basis. I have in the mindset school, 2 Corinthians 10:5 is our main scripture of focus. And it says, we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. And we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. And what in that moment, even with your definition of salvation in your mind and what you thought you had to live up to, you could never measure up. And how that must have felt to think that it was almost like earning your worth and your value. That
Yeah,
has
I
to
really
be
thought
hard.
I had fell off of the wagon and there was no that in order to get back on I was going to have to work so much harder than I ever could. I really thought that I lost my hope at that point in life. I really thought, if you're going to sin, you might as well just live it up. It was a really messed up way of thinking. It came from many years of growing up feeling like you had to do everything perfect. Now I do know now that we're saved by grace, not by works. And thank God for that. Thank God for that.
So then you were with this guy. He was so cute and enticing. And then you started dabbling in drugs and really started to change your life in a direction. And you thought that kind of this was the way. There was some fulfillment in there.
And because I was living with somebody that I wasn't married to, my family was really hardcore pushing that you have to get married now because you already slept with him. Now you have to marry him. And so, not quite a year after I met him, I told him, we have to either get married or break up because my family's just having a breakdown. And he was like, okay, let's get married. And so we just threw together a really quick wedding. And I cried through it because I knew I was making a mistake. I knew that this was not the way I wanted life to be. And I knew that he had grown up in the kind of household where drugs were common. His parents had done drugs. He had a really potty mouth. He watched porn. All the things that I had grown up believing were so wrong was to him like that was just regular life. And I felt like this was going to be a really hard life of trying to change him. And that was really how I went into this marriage, was like, now it's going to be my responsibility to change him and bring him to God. But I had this drug addiction. And during the 3 years, the first, I guess, 3 years of our relationship, we both were really strung out. and we lost a couple of babies. I had a couple of miscarriages during that time that I didn't know that I was pregnant till it was too late both times. And that was so crushing because I had always wanted to be a mother, and I really thought during that time that this was punishment and that it was all my fault because I had stepped into sin, and therefore stepping into sin, I couldn't have children. It was like I had a really twisted mindset, to be honest.
Yeah.
I really thought a lot of crazy things, kind of superstitious almost. And God is not a God of superstition, but I really had a superstitious type religious background.
And in that, like, that moment that you're dealing with that pain and also striving, thinking you have to live up to here and dealing with all of those things, and then being in that moment with really not having your mind, you're on drugs, your mind isn't as conscious as you need it to be in order to function at your best level. Oh, Jodi,
And
I'm so
somehow
sorry for your loss.
I
So
thought at the
sorry.
time too that I could think more, that I was in a better mind frame as far as I knew, because when you're on drugs, it's deceiving. It's very deceptive. And you feel like you can conquer the world whenever other people are seeing you just you looking like a mess. You feel like inside of you, like you're at your best. And I did feel that way. And so after having my second miscarriage though, I knew that I would never be able to have children if I kept on that lifestyle. And my heart wanted to be a mom more than anything in the world. That's where I felt like was my calling in life. Like that was what I was born for, was to be a mother. And I started just begging, can we please quit doing drugs? Can we please quit doing drugs? And he let me know that was his first love and that I was second, and that he would never quit. And so we ended up, I quit though. Now, the way I quit is this is a God story entirely. I felt compelled one Sunday to show up to a church that I had gone to off and on as a kid. And I was desperate. I was desperate to change my life at this point. And so I showed up to this church of a couple hundred people that I had attended some off and on as a kid. Hadn't been there in several years at this point. But I went one Sunday morning by myself because I knew my husband wasn't going to go with me, and especially with my plan. So I got there and they did the praise and worship time, and then they called for testimony time, and then I knew their order of events. The next thing was prayer time, prayer requests. And as soon as they called for prayer requests, I was sitting in the very back of a really big church, and I got up and I walked straight up the middle aisle, straight up to the person with the microphone that was taking prayer requests, and I asked for the mic, and I turned around and faced the church, and I said to about 200 elderly people for the most part, my name's Jodi, which I think most of them knew who I was. My name's Jodi, and I'm a meth addict, and I've lost a couple babies because of it, and I want to quit. And I tell you, the whole church let out a giant sigh, and probably 50 old ladies come rushing to the front of the church as fast as old ladies can rush, and just held on to me and started praying for me. And this was one of the kind of churches where they take you by the shoulders and shake you a little bit while they're praying. And they had my hands up and shaking them in the air, and they were calling out to God for deliverance, and they held me for months. They showed up just on a regular basis. There was a different old lady showing up every day or two with a basket of goodies that they just baked for me, or asking me to take me to lunch, or to take me to go for a walk with me, or inviting me over to show me how to make jam. There were so many sweet older ladies that just had a heart for God and a heart for helping young people. And I don't know, they took me on, and I never went back to drugs. I mean, that was in my early 20s, and now I'm in my mid 40s. It's been more than 20 years now.
Wow.
They helped me to get away from that.
So Shout out to old ladies. Shout
Yes.
out to women truly being who they are in Christ, older in their life, and the intercessors and the people that stand in the gap. I just released a podcast this week and from a sweet lady. Her name is Tammy Fred. And she had a similar story with an older lady and how she stood in the gap in intercessory prayer for her in her life. But shout out to you too, Jodi, because that willingness to, in that moment, just walk up there and say, I'm at the bottom of my pit and I need help. And this is gonna be embarrassing. And I can't imagine like what thoughts and what feelings were you feeling that you finally came to that place that you're like, I don't care what this looks like. I don't care what people think of me. I know that I need help. And if I go to God's house, I know that I can get help at this
Yeah.
particular church.
I can't really tell you what made me go to that particular church, to be honest. Just it was close to home. It was a short drive to get there. And but I remember standing at the front of that church. I mean, even the walking down the aisle towards the front, just shaking all over. It was like something in me was screaming, "You'll never be able to do meth again if you do this." And something else in me was screaming, "Thank God I'm going to get free." And that was the goal, was freedom. In that particular day, all I could think about was two babies. I could have been a mama to two babies. And
Mhm.
I lost them because of a drug habit. And I didn't think my husband would ever get off of it. And sure enough, I stayed with him for a total of 7 years and he never quit. And in fact, he ended up selling drugs out of our home by the time I finally left. I found out that he was selling out of our home and he was selling to my best friend and her husband. And I had to disconnect from all of my friends because they had all been friends I had made during that lifestyle. And they were all part of that. I had to lose everybody for the most part. But a year later, I found out I was having a baby. And that's the joy that I was looking for. And God redeemed me, is really, but I still look back and think how shocking it is that I did that, to be honest, because most of the friends that I had during those years, most of them have died since then, either from drug overdoses or because they got caught up in some really bad situation and got killed over drugs. And the ones that aren't dead are in jail or prison or have been in and out of jail or prison because of drugs. And I just praise God all the time that He delivered me. He put it in my heart. I know it wasn't me, it was God changed my heart and gave me a heart of love for children,
Yeah.
for getting to be a mother.
So I hear this, but I want you in this moment to realize that you are willing to accept the gift of freedom that God had for you, that it's always available. At every point in our lives, that freedom and that redemption for whatever struggle we're going through. I struggle today. I have my own mindset things. Just because I have the mindset school doesn't mean I don't deal with my mindset, because I
Right.
cannot tell you I've arrived on any journey. But here's the deal: God's redemption is available for us in every area of our lives. And if
Amen.
we will accept it and if we'll take it for ourselves in an area and take action towards it, just like you are willing to drive to that church, to walk down that aisle while you're sweaty. I have to do it
Yeah.
sweaty all the time. I'm sweaty. I'm like, I don't want to do this, God. This feels uncomfortable. This feels terrible. I don't
Yes.
want to say that to her. I know if I say that, then it's going to be uncomfortable. But when I'm obedient and I lean into those things, God lets me grow. And I'm so glad that you're still here, because without that growth away from that area, you can clearly see the direction that we end up. And so many
Yes.
times we don't take the time to play that tape all the way to the end and see where that road is going to lead us. I'm so grateful you're here. and God redeemed your story. So then you're there and you made that decision and you're growing and you're cutting people out of your life. Then what happened next?
Well, I lived with my husband at the time for the next several years, and we had two children. But like I said, I found out that he never had quit doing drugs, and I found out that he was selling them out of our home. So I had to leave because I knew I would end up losing my children eventually if I kept on living in that home because of just association is the way it would have been. So I left and I took my kids at the time that were 4 and 1, and I loaded them up into the little Jimmy that we had at the time with everything that was most valuable to me as far as household stuff, everything that would fit into my Jimmy. And I drove us 1,000 miles away from him because he was threatening my life at that point because I had left him. He was threatening my life. And it was really a scary situation. So he slashed my tires and did just multiple things that were scary. And so I loaded my kids and my belongings and I moved 1,000 miles away to Colorado and where my brother lived. And I filed for divorce and everything. And it was really rough because I had a lot of family who had not been there for me for a lot of other things in life, but suddenly they were preaching to me that divorce was wrong and that I was going to go to hell for getting a divorce. So I think because I felt like I had yet again stepped into some deep sin by getting a divorce, I fell off the deep end again. Within a couple years, I started drinking, and I didn't know that alcoholism could become just like drug addiction, to be honest. But it took me a few years of drinking, heavy drinking. And during that drinking, I kept on being told by people, "We're praying for you a husband. God just needs to give you a husband. What you need is a good man in your life." And I heard that from everybody I knew, that I just needed a husband. So I met a guy in church. He had shown up with his kids, and I met him, and a couple ladies in the church said, "I think God just brought you a husband." And what they didn't know was that he was a heavy drinker, and that he and we met and began drinking together immediately. And we married within a month or two. I think it was maybe 2 months after I met him that I married him, crying through the whole wedding, knowing I was making a mistake yet again. Yet somehow I thought, well, this mistake, it'll change and God will turn this all around and we're going to be a godly couple. I don't know. I had some ideas that did not pan out. What ended up being was a very scary year of being together with somebody who was mentally and emotionally very abusive. And God again saved me from another addiction. This time I ended up pregnant with my now 8-year-old. And immediately, whenever I found out I was pregnant, there was no question about it anymore. All the trouble I had with quitting drinking went away. I immediately quit drinking. And it was a few months into my pregnancy whenever I realized the damage that was happening to my older children, who were by that time 11 and 8, I believe. And they had been going through some traumatic experiences with my new husband and his children. And anyways, God showed me these things during pregnancy. And so I again ended up filing for a divorce. By the time the divorce was final, whenever Titus was 3 weeks old. Anyways, God pulled me out of that. I have not drank again. And next month will be 9 years now that I have been sober. And by the
Praise
grace of God,
God. Praise
yeah.
God.
And you know what? I have learned so much through these years. I really thought at first, whenever I found out I was pregnant, and of course I knew I would never drink while I was pregnant. I remember thinking that I might not survive the pregnancy because I couldn't live without alcohol. I really felt at that point like life was too hard. I would never laugh again. I would never be happy again. And I had a mindset, I tell you, that was so toxic at the time, where I just did not think that life could be good ever again, and that I had messed up too much. And thankfully, God renewed my mind from that for sure. I know I now have more hope than I have ever had in my life. I have three beautiful, amazing children. I no longer have a constant feeling like I have to get married so that my life will be complete. I have to have somebody with me to be able to succeed at life, or to be able to laugh, or to be able to have a good holiday or anything. All of that God has delivered me from, which I feel like is even greater than delivering me from drugs and alcohol, is delivering me from that feeling of hopelessness and of always needing to be with somebody to be able to be happy or complete. Those things are no longer part of my daily thought pattern. It's just not how I think anymore. And that's a total God thing.
Mm,
I can't even tell you exactly how God got me to this point. At
mhm.
this point, like, I can't even tell you what the steps were exactly, except I just know that God showed up and showed me that he can be my husband, and he can be my provider, and he can be my companion and my comforter. And that's where I am now.
Mm. I love that. And it's okay that you don't know the steps, because here's the deal. He says if we seek him, we'll find him, right?
Right.
And that's sometimes people don't really lean into that. Like, it's in the journey on the day-to-day basis where when we screw up, instead of at that point where we screw up, putting on our boxing gloves and beating ourselves up mentally to where we feel like we might as well go do the drugs or go fulfill ourselves in other ways. That isn't
Right.
really the destination that we want for our lives. But yet, we don't have to put on those gloves. And when we choose God's grace and forgiveness in that moment, it's falling forward. It's here's a little step in the right direction. And here's
Yeah.
one more step in the right direction. I see this in the mindset school. I see it with the women in that space and how their daily movements. It's when we fail in how we think and the things that we put above God, and if we'll
Yeah.
just continually make those adjustments in life, it's then that it changes. And it's like we get to the top of the mountain because we just kept climbing and we don't know
Yes.
when we got there. But
And when you
when,
slip a little, you don't have to just go back to the bottom and start over. You don't have to. I've learned that there is no condemnation in Christ, that whenever I do slip, when I do fail, I can just get up immediately and get back on the horse. I don't have to wait for my punishment and to self-loathe for a week or two first. I don't have to do all that anymore. I have learned that God says, you're not condemned. What you've done doesn't change my relationship with you in any way. He can't love me any less or any more than what he does. And so any mistake I make at this point in my life, I'm immediately like, oh, that was dumb, and turn around and live, choose to live different. Not, I no longer have that feeling of like sin is sin. It's not like that. I do know, I understand now that there are consequences to sin, but that does not determine what our life is. If I made a mistake 10 years ago, then I can now advocate against that mistake. I don't have to live like that. Like, that's not who I am because I did that. Anyways, that's something God has taught me, and it took a long time. But
yeah,
I've learned it.
yeah, and me too. It took me a long time and I still like daily, like sometimes I'll find myself striving and I'm like, why am I striving? Why am I doing this to myself? It's not the way. It's not the path that God has for me. And
Yeah.
and it's in that grace in that moment where I just give it all to him and I'm like, God, look, here I was thinking of myself in a way that doesn't honor you again, that I've got to achieve something in order to be valuable in your eyes.
Yeah.
And if I achieve no more things throughout my entire life, I have so much value in the eyes of God. Just
Yeah.
how I am, just how I am right here. My messy self, my messy, messy, messy self. He loves me.
And having these beautiful kids that he blessed me with, that I got to have these children and raise them all these years, watching them grow and learn helps me to understand the heart of God for sure. Because, of course, whenever my kid makes a mistake, I don't expect them to spend a week or a month in self loathing and self criticizing and everything else before they're allowed to come back into my arms. No, of course not. That's not what love is. And the heart of God is exactly like that. Of course, He wants us to immediately come back into His loving arms. He doesn't want us to spend a great amount of time beating ourselves up for what we've done, or just rolling in our slop is the way I think of it. Like, now that I'm a mess, I might as well just roll in my mess.
Mhm.
That was a problem I had for many years, but no longer is that a problem, because I now know that the love of God is so much greater than I once understood. Yeah.
I love that. That's so amazing. Taking that weight and taking it off of our body so that stress isn't there on us to strive and be anything but
Yeah.
who He created us to be, and accepting on a daily basis His grace, His love, His salvation in our identities of all the mess that we are. There's so much peace and freedom in it. And if we truly get that to a deep level, it affects generations, just like you're saying. I didn't get that right. When my kids were young, I was still trying to be perfect, right? And
Yeah.
I would often require perfection of them, something that
Yeah.
they could have never measured up to. And I've had to go and make amends with them and apologize and say, look, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I screwed this up as a parent, and I'm sorry for the way that it wired you. I'm sorry for the effect that it had on you as a child. And I messed it up. And in that moment of grace and asking forgiveness with them, knowing that they don't expect perfection of me, they've always looked up to me, but that grace of God that was there to restore that moment and that relationship with them. There's beauty in asking forgiveness, even with our children when we mess up too.
I probably ask my kids to, or maybe not ask them to forgive me, but I apologize. What I feel like is a lot more than most parents, possibly, at least definitely more than my parents did. But I want them to know that we're all human and that mistakes do not define us, and that that whenever I do something wrong towards them, where I'm huffy and say something rude that may be hurtful, I would like them to know that was wrong, that they don't deserve to be treated like that, and that I am just another human depending on the grace and mercy of God. And so I do try really hard to always apologize for things. And I think they're learning from that. That's one of my things I've done right in life.
Mm,
And thank God that He taught me that. And so, and I don't want them to ever feel that if they make a mistake, that they can't come back, that they can't feel like they belong still in this family because they've messed up or something. I don't want to ever feel like I don't belong in the family of God. We're in God's
mm.
presence.
That's beautiful, Jodi. You articulated that so beautiful. Your love for your children is beautiful. And it really was a catalyst to your change,
Yeah,
to really desire something, to be someone so much, that desire that was within you to be a mom and to be a good mom. I think that was just God within you all along. But He puts
I
desires in our
agree.
heart. Yeah.
I remember being a little girl and just couldn't wait to grow up and have children. Could not wait. It was always my biggest dream in life was to be a mom. And I believe that was a God thing. I think growing up, my mom, I felt like she didn't really want to be a mom. She had to be a mom too early in life. Got pregnant at 16. And by the time she was 24, she had 5 kids. And I think she was always tired. She was always just irritated, and then, which I can understand, she was also very depressed. She was in an abusive relationship and had all these kids against her will because she had not wanted to have more than two, is what she always said. But anyways, she had all these kids and had a really rough time of being a mom. And maybe that was part of what made it in my heart, like, when I'm a mom, I want to be all up in their faces. I want to be part of everything. But I don't think it was me. I know that God puts in our hearts these dreams and these desires, and definitely it was a God thing. And that was his path for me for salvation, I do believe. And if Titus, I wonder all the time if what other way God might have freed me from alcoholism without Titus being brought into the world. But man, so grateful for that little kid. He is such a refreshing, wonderful, just wonderful child, makes my life so complete. And during a hard and miserable time of life, out of it, God brought this beauty from the ashes, really. And that, yes, that was his method of saving me for sure. Um,
Wow. Wow. That's such a beautiful story. So now you are helping other people with their cleaning. So
yes.
tell me more about your business, and I hear your heart behind it. You want them not only to have a clean environment because you know the benefit of it mentally on them, the benefit of their families, but you also want it to be done in a natural way that and you see the benefit how it eliminates the stressors on your body. Tell me why that's important and how you came into that.
Okay, so after cleaning vacation rentals and hotel rooms and motels and office buildings and you name it, I've cleaned everything, residential places for a couple decades now. But about, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, I started having like numb hands and just, and I kept pushing myself even though I couldn't feel my hands anymore. And then they would cramp really bad at night and they would swell up. And I didn't know what was going on for the longest time. Found out I had carpal tunnel syndrome in both hands, but I kept working with it because had to make the money to provide for my kids. So I pushed myself. I ended up with some spinal issues, and they said that I developed osteoarthritis in my hands and in my spine and neck, all due to overworking. I pushed myself so hard for so long, just trying to provide a good life. Also, during that time, I wasn't charging the top rates. I was charging less than other people so I could get the jobs, which means I was working even harder than I had to. I was using chemical sprays, things with bleach in them and such things like that. And my lungs have become really fragile. So pretty much I just developed multiple issues in my body because of cleaning supplies and because of pushing myself and not doing stretches and stuff that I should have been doing. And so I ended up with bilateral carpal tunnel release on both hands at the same time, had to have surgery on. And that was about 2.5 years ago now. I also ended up having several years of physical therapy I had shoulder impingement on one side and thoracic outlet syndrome in the other shoulder, and just a messed up spine and everything. And so I've had to have shots for pain. I've had to have physical therapy. I've had to have chiropractors. It's been a real hassle. All those appointments constantly trying to fix the damage that was caused by pushing myself too hard. Through all the physical therapy and occupational therapy, I learned multitudes of stretches that I should have been doing for all those years to avoid the repetitive stress issues that I ended up with. And I could have avoided having arthritis in my hands at such an early age to such an extreme, because they're really pretty crippled now. But anyways, now it's been 2.5 years since I had the surgery on my hands. I'm finally able to write and type again, because it just took so long for me to heal properly and for me to get my strength back and dexterity and everything in my hands. And so I guess it was back in October or November, just this past year, that I started writing everything I know about cleaning with all natural products, and about doing stretches to avoid repetitive stress injuries. And I started writing all this stuff down, not knowing if I was writing a book or what. But then I realized I could do a blog. So I started putting those things into blog posts, and I've got about 36 blog posts now. And as I started putting them in blog posts, then I realized that I could actually turn this into a course. So I built them into an online certification course where I would like to teach people to do green cleaning, where they use no toxins whatsoever, just all natural ingredients, and also teaching them what to do. What am I trying to say? What stretches and daily routines you can get into to avoid carpal tunnel syndrome, thoracic outlet syndrome, back injuries, all the things that are most common to housekeepers, I ended up with, it seemed like. And so I would like to teach other people how to do the same job that I do, with less exhaustion, with less pain afterwards, and with far less toxins building up in their system. And that's the goal.
Oh, I love it. I absolutely love it. You know, I have asthma and I can't use all those cleaning things either that are so toxic to our bodies. So we're going to have to talk. But the thing that I hear you is, here I was striving, it's causing all this tension, stress on my body. And then
Mm-hmm.
I stopped striving and I found a pathway. And it's going to cause you all of these problems if you continue down this path. So let's get on this road together. It's very similar to my journey. Like, here I was striving. I was
Yeah.
doing all these things wrong in my mindset, and let's get on this path together. And that's the beauty of how God works. He's such a
Yes.
redeemer. The things that were meant to harm you the most are the things that he often uses to redeem your story and your life. And I'm so grateful for the
Amen.
journey that you're on now. You know, the journey from using chemicals, even in your body, in the meth story, to
Yeah.
going to all natural and knowing that here's a pathway to no stresses on the outside. I love it. I love it. So, how can the audience reach you and contact you if they would like to know more about what you offer?
My website is www.pristine.team. Through the website, you can find my blog posts, but also my training course, which is called the Pristine Green Clean Certification Course. I have a community, a membership community, that is also called the Pristine Scene, and they can find access to the community through my website as well. So just www.pristine.team, which Pristine, Pristine. And so that's where I can be found. And I am coming out with new content all the time. I've got so many ideas. I just recently sent out an email to all of my contacts asking for ideas for videos. What would they be most interested in seeing? And I now have a whole list of new things that I intend to make videos of: folding fitted sheets, and make videos of a few other things. Anyways, I've got some things about to happen. And I just started a YouTube channel, but I have only uploaded one non-edited video so far. So pretty soon I will be, as I learn, I've got more content coming out. I have like pages of ideas of things to create. I just have to learn how to do them properly. But I want to also eventually make my own videos of stretches. But currently within my blog posts, I have videos that I have found off of YouTube and off of TikTok, where there's numerous stretch videos helping people learn how to take care of their body properly and not allow these injuries to happen. So
Awesome. Awesome. This is beautiful. I love that you're sharing this with the world, but I'm going to link everything below in the show notes. So make sure you check those out. Make sure you contact Jodi and check out Pristine Clean. It's pristine.team, www.pristine.team, and you can find her there. And Jodi, is there anything else that you want to say to the audience before we go? Maybe there's a lady out there and she has been striving her entire life, and so her life's been toxic. What do you say to her?
there is hope in God. He does not label us and stick us in a bin to the side. Whenever we have failed in any way whatsoever, there is grace and there is mercy, and He will lift us up out of there. And He loves us like a father, like a good father. Anything that you've gone through or that you're currently going through is not beyond Him. It's not above Him. It's not out of His control. I believe that that is what I would like people to understand, that no matter where you have failed, no matter what has gone wrong, that He will lift you up and hold you in His arms like a good, loving father, and that He will give you the desires of your heart, meaning He will put desires into your heart to help you to strive for the right things, and then He will hold you by the hand and lead you that way. That is what I'd like everybody to know, no matter where you're at, no matter what point you're at in life right now. There was a time whenever I was doing meth and I was telling people about Jesus while doing meth, and it made no sense. In my mind, looking back, it's wow, I was really twisted. But that was God saying, I've still got you. Even in your dirtiest and in your scuzziest point of life, I've got you. I'm still holding on to you, and I'm going to pull you right out of it. And if you let Him, He's going to pull you out of it. And if you just let go of all the self-loathing, let go of the feeling that now I have to go this route because this is the route that I chose. Don't label yourself, because God doesn't label you anything other than His child and the love of His life. You're the apple of His eye, no matter where you're at. That's
Jodi,
it.
that's so good. I'm getting chills as you say all of that. And I know I'm going to have this handy. So when I'm having a bad day, I'm going to put you on repeat on my computer in my ears. That was so good. Thank you. Thank you for speaking into my life right here where I'm at right now. Like, literally, your words spoke to my heart. So thank you. Jodi, it is such a
Thank you.
pleasure and an honor to hear your story. I loved how God's redeemed your life and you now see yourself through His lens. And you're beautiful. You're beautiful from the inside out.
Thank
And
you.
I hope everyone can see your beauty and reaches out to you and connects with you.
I look forward to hearing from some people. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. As always, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss an episode. If you like what you heard, I'd love to know. Leave us a review and share with a friend that could use an overcoming story so they can move closer to their purpose for their lives by renewing their mind the way God intended. Hey friends, thank you for listening. You're now done with step 1 of growing together at the Mindset School. Head over to themindsetschool.net and grab my free download where I share 5 tips when you can't hold it together anymore and continue your journey to smiling authentically from the inside out.